Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
What's up? What's down? What is going on around? I'm Paulo Leasing, founder of Million DC. This show is an offshoot of my book, Startup Taiwan, Foreigner's Business Guide, aimed at answering your questions about starting a business here in Taiwan. So leave your questions in the comments section below. Enough about me. Let me introduce our guest, Michelle Bradley from New York City, USA, and Cape Town, South Africa. Michelle is an intercultural trainer and consultant specializing in East-West cross-cultural communication. She has lived in Taiwan for 14 years, as well as studied or worked in Boston, LA, London, Melbourne, Kyushu in Japan, and in India. Michelle is a bilingual in English and Mandarin Chinese and an avid student of traditional Chinese culture. Michelle, welcome to the show. How did you get into Taiwan?
Well, when I was younger, I was very interested in traditional Chinese culture. And then after I finished university in the States, I traveled around literally from as high up as the Himalayas all the way down to Hanoi, looking all around. And I eventually settled on Taipei as the perfect place. Very interesting, culturally rich, delicious food, super friendly people.
So our topic for today is accepting different cultural background to allow foreigners and locals work together either in big companies, like work efficiently, either in big companies or startups, even for companies that have, even for Taiwan companies that have offices abroad. And I know you're an expert to that. But before we get to that, could you tell us about your job as an intercultural trainer? What does intercultural trainer do, and how do you measure the success for what you do?
Sure, Paulo. So imagine that we are fish. So fish that live in a home will either be swimming in a fish bowl, like a goldfish bowl, or in an aquarium, like a small tank. And when fish are swimming in the water in their tank, for example, they see the water as their world. So there's an analogy about intercultural training where the elder fish swims past the two younger fish and asks them, "How's the water today, boys?" And they look at each other and they say, "What water?" So this is how most of us view our environment. We just take it as normal. So how to identify the water and what are the qualities, characteristics? Is it light blue, dark blue? What kind of environment you're in? The one that you're the most familiar with is the one that is the hardest to define. So intercultural work first helps you to define and understand your own cultural background and perceptions and the values that shape your behavior. And then going from there, you're better equipped to be able to identify and have empathy and understanding for people who swim in different water. So in terms of how I can judge what I would consider to be a successful training or workshop or long-term sort of training relationship would be when someone can very quickly, what we call code switch, which would be to identify, okay, so the water that this person is swimming in is different than mine in these places. So I can understand that, then I can see the differences, and I can also see the similarities, find the common points, and adjust myself accordingly. And for like a better win-win situation, no matter what type of industry or environment they're in.
Okay. Forgive me for my innocence, but how is this different from teaching language?
Okay. So do you mind if I use another metaphor?
Sure.
Okay. It's also to do with water, but now it's frozen water. So
Okay.
we're moving on to an iceberg now. So in intercultural communication theory, we often think about a culture as an iceberg. So basically 10% is above the surface, it's what's seen, and 90% is below. So what is visible, for example, if you go to Spain, it's very easy to identify, okay, people are eating tapas, there is Spanish food. Okay, so one of the other things that are on the known or visible surface is language, okay? So language is a construct that we need in order to communicate. However, below the surface, the invisible might be a relationship to time, gender perception, relationship to authority, whether your communication style is more indirect or direct. Mm-hmm. So teaching language is a very important aspect of intercultural communication. However, it's one form of it. However, it's not the whole thing. So I'll give you an example. You must have heard in Taiwan, perhaps maybe someone a little bit older has asked you, have you eaten yet?
Yes. 你吃饱了吗? Yes.
Yeah, 吃饱了吗? Or 吃了没? So in the US, if we translated that, or in the UK, or in any English-speaking country, actually, that would be translated to like, have you eaten yet? Or maybe like in the context of the situation, have you eaten lunch?
Yes.
However, according to your understanding of what that means, does that have different connotations? Does that have a different assigned meaning than the word when you translate into English?
No, it's
okay, you gave me the wrong answer, but I thank you. No, it's good you said that. So okay, okay, I'm just going to move on. In Chinese culture, that has historical roots as well as cultural values assigned to it that we wouldn't understand if we hadn't explored the culture and the history of Chinese culture in Taiwan. So this is one example of sometimes you can hear words in a language, but you might not understand the meaning behind it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
So basically,
I can give you more examples.
No.
Yeah, go ahead. Please.
So
yeah.
basically, I get confused most of the time because the way I'm learning Chinese is basically just repeating what people tell me without the real context of how things are, why something would be different from another thing. And sometimes people would explain to me, oh, in this context, it should be mentioned in this way. In this context, you mention it this way. Yeah. And I was like, okay, so it's like, and they were like, oh, it's gonna be weird if you say it in one specific way, even though we understand what you mean. So they were like, oh, people are gonna smile when you mention these words to them, but they could understand you, but because you don't know the actual culture of it, so you're not using the right words to communicate. So yeah, I think that I'm 90% getting what you're doing. So what's interesting about your job is that specifically in Taiwan it's amazing that you're able to get some clients, specifically Taiwanese clients, to get your kind of service. And in my observation, a lot of Taiwanese companies don't seem to pay for something like this. How do you convince them?
From the time that we had our pre-discussion to now, I've been thinking about this question a lot. And actually, the honest answer is that I feel like what's more important is, am I convinced? Because if you are a service, especially if you embody the service, then you need to be an example that customers or potential customers can look at and find value in you being a conduit for that service. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I find the most powerful tool is just to do a good job with what I have with the people that I'm working with now. And just like if you were a doctor or even a restaurant owner, you would just do your best, and maybe the current patient that you have or the current customer in your restaurant that you have would recommend you to a friend when they got sick or when they got hungry. So I think word of mouth is a very powerful thing, and really like believing and caring about what you do, I think goes really far away.
Okay, but do you agree that Taiwanese are still not fully open or aware of other culture, at least within companies? And how do you think should this be addressed?
Yeah, I think that this is actually a global issue, funnily enough, even for really multicultural countries, some of which I come from. I think we're still dealing with this issue, especially more recently. You know, this is kind of shift from globalization back to sort of more like localization. So the question is, what does it mean to be open to other cultures? So do Taiwanese have an open and respectful and welcoming attitude towards foreigners? I would say, of course, you can't speak for a whole nation, but generally speaking, yes, my experience and the people I know's experience, yes. Could there be is there work to be done to make the workforce more diverse? Certainly. I think it's interesting, you know, because I think there's a big push now. I know that for the last couple of episodes that you've been focusing on is about making English one of the second language for Taiwan, right? Bilingual 2030. My comment or my point would be, just think about how many Taiwanese people when they were younger spent how much money going to cram schools to study English, and worked so hard to make an effort to adapt themselves, to learn about the culture of the country that they wanted to go study in or work in. And you can see it's very obvious how hard people work to adjust to their international environments. So I would say, as a foreigner, since I'm not in the government, I don't have control over the Taiwanese companies nor the decisions that are made politically. That what I can do, and hopefully what I can recommend or inspire others to do, is to try your best to love your home. Like, and what does that mean? You know, Taiwanese culture, from a intercultural perspective, is higher on the risk averse scale as opposed to risk taking. So if companies are more risk averse, and also they are more focused on long-term relationship building, so it takes a long time to develop trust. If you want a Taiwanese company or a multinational that works in Taiwan, or even just a group of people like an entrepreneur setup to become more international, I think that it's on us to make the effort to meet them not only halfway, but more than halfway.
I like
so
it.
I think sorry, go ahead.
You first.
I think if we did that, and if we tried, if someone who really wants to make this their home made that kind of effort and showed the sort of enthusiasm and the trust that's needed, I think, you know, a lot of doors will be open.
I like how you say that it should be 50-50. Like, if you're a foreigner coming into Taiwan, you should also be aware of the culture that people here have, and you should also be accepting of their culture, as opposed to always insisting that of your own culture to them. And I guess that's where you get the value of these cultural exchange, and you know, the goal of working together smoothly, either in companies or even when we see foreigners around, or Taiwanese, like even in casual conversations.
For sure. Yeah, there's something called cultural currency. And cultural currency is basically like how strong the value of your culture, or maybe even your native language, can be exchanged for a benefit, whether it's professional or personal, in your host country. And I think if you do come from a country that has a strong cultural currency here, that's fine. However, you we say in, I think, mostly American English, the buck doesn't stop there. So that's like the beginning. There's still a lot more work that you can do to integrate. In Chinese, there's an expression, 如今随俗, which basically translates kind of like when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, I was born in New York City. I think New York City is a really good example of this. Like, as soon as anybody arrives in New York, as soon as their feet hit the ground, they're no longer a foreigner. They're kind of like a local, right? And they have to assimilate and adapt. And especially the younger generation, they have to learn the language, and they have to adjust themselves to accommodate, sort of the urban environment. So I think if people did the same here, then they may find that there's a lot more options than they expected. Yeah.
You've been here in Taiwan for like 14 years. Do you think Taiwan has made like a significant improvement related to being more open to other people's culture? And I would also add on to that, do you think the foreigners are also doing the same thing, like accepting of the Taiwanese culture?
If you look at it, okay, if we go back to the iceberg metaphor, if you look at the 10%, the visible aspects of the culture, it's very obvious, in terms of entertainment options, or cuisine, or even access to reading materials, or just walking down the street. You can see it's much more sort of feels more international, right? I think Taiwan is interesting in the sense that, traditionally speaking, it has been very open to other cultures, in the sense that Taiwan's an island nation, and in many senses, it's a country with a strong history of immigration. And I think that's one of the reasons why, if you look at things like the amount of women in high positions in many industries in Taiwan is much higher than a lot of other countries in the region, Northeast Asia. Also, when was it, 3 years ago, when the law was enacted for same-sex marriage? Yeah, all of these things I think Taiwan is quite progressive about. And I think Taiwanese also have an excellent quality about looking beyond, except for the news. Okay, I'm not going to comment on the news, but besides that, I think Taiwan are pretty good at like looking beyond their borders and trying to understand or appreciate other cultures. And they have like a very sincere curiosity and interest in learning about, the people that make this place their home. And in terms of the foreigners, yeah, well, it's interesting because I think it's like reading a book that you've read 10 years ago and then you read it again, like it's the same book, but you read it in a very different way. So when I first came to Taiwan, I was more sort of in the expat crowd with people who hadn't really assimilated and were kind of like, they took their life from abroad and sort of brought it here. Whereas now, most of the people that I know are fluent in Chinese, and they consider this their home, and they're quite assimilated with Taiwanese people and Taiwanese culture. So from my own perspective, yes. However, it's kind of hard to look at it as a whole community, because I don't necessarily have access to everyone.
Correct. And I could identify with you because I've been in Taiwan for like 11 years, and when I came here, I was also a foreigner. like new to everything. But now I feel like most of my friends are mostly Taiwanese or also foreigners who have
Yeah.
been in Taiwan for like a really long time, wherein we're no longer surprised with so many things that are happening here. Like we're somehow used to it. And on my part, I no longer like insist on my own culture to other Taiwanese people that I meet. I just naturally act around them based on how I know they could identify, or at least they would know what I mean when I say things. Um,
Great.
yeah. So this program is also meant to be like a guide for foreigners, especially those who wanted to establish themselves here. And I know that you have an APRC already, and
Yeah.
you are somehow we could call you like a freelancer, although it doesn't mean that you're less busy or not working, because you're always, in fact it's even hard to book a time with you for interviews because you're always outside dealing with clients. Could you give us like our audience like some views on how it is that you started to become like a freelancer here in Taiwan?
Okay. Yeah, so it happened kind of accidentally. And so I came to Taiwan actually, a yoga, space yoga, a yoga company brought me over. I'm also a yoga teacher. And I was there for many years. And then I had APRC qualifications, and 3 months before I was ready to get my APRC, both the company and I forgot to renew my working visa. And I went to the immigration office and they said to me, "Oh, sorry, you have to go back to zero."
Oh no.
So I was at the immigration office like crying my eyes out, and the woman's like, next. You know? So if any of you have that experience, stay strong. I waited another 5 years. After 10 years in Taiwan, I got my APRC. So after that, I realized that having this kind of open working permit really gave me the freedom to sit back and think, okay, so if my presence or my legal status in Taiwan is not dependent on an employer, then what contribution do I want to make? And being in a position of having worked with cross-cultural environments all my life, then what is it that I would like to say or to do? So from there, I went back to school, and I studied more like theoretically, formally about intercultural communication, and then I opened my own little business. And so with an open working permit, I can stay in Taiwan, have Taiwanese clients. Also, now I do a lot of work with clients in other countries, like yesterday with a company that works with the US, India, and Taiwan. It's very interesting. And it's given me a lot of freedom. So I think it's really great now. I haven't looked into the details, but I think now you can get an APRC in like 2 or 3 years or something instead of 5 years. So I really I encourage as many people who are interested to do that, and try and pursue what you feel passionately about.
Yeah, the news that I read says foreigners could now apply for an APRC after 3 years of being in Taiwan with a working permit. And that's actually a good news for many who are just waiting for that to happen before they could do a lot of like waiting to do the things that they really want to do outside corporations or companies in Taiwan. Well, I think you kind of mentioned something that's related to my question, like what should be the policies that should be in place so that it could ease up some of the probably burdens or like difficulties that you encountered when you're transitioning to becoming like your own boss or like an entrepreneur here in Taiwan?
Um, I know I'm supposed to suggest an improvement, but I was really happy with the process.
Okay, that's good.
So I'm sure there's ways that they can improve, but the process of applying for my APRC and then getting my work permit was great, and I was really happy with it. So I would say, I mean, I'm sure they could streamline it or maybe offer more incentives, but I think they're doing a great job.
I think one of the benefits for having an APRC, and if you are like employed in a company, is being part of the what's this? The retirement, the retirement benefit. Yes.
The welfare, yeah.
Yeah, the welfare, social
Um,
welfare. Yeah.
Yes, I go through like an organization that sort of works with independent entrepreneurs and educators, and so I pay monthly to them for both my health insurance and my labor insurance. So I do that separately because I don't have a company to pay it for me, but I think it's important too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also remember when I applied for an APRC, I did that when I was still employed in a company, and they actually helped me apply for my APRC back then, and it was like a smooth process. It's filling in the same form, except you'll just check APRC application instead of ARC extension or some other purposes. And then you just have to wait for the, I think I just waited for like a month before I finally got my APRC. And then from then I started planning about what I wanted to do here in Taiwan, which is,
That's great.
which is which is do whatever I'm doing right now, like running my own startup. Hey, let's do a quick round. So basically,
Okay.
I have here some things that just tell me what's in your mind. First thing that comes to your mind.
All right.
All right.
I'm really curious how this is gonna go.
Just tell me what comes to your mind, or answer the question as fast as possible. Ready?
Okay.
All right.
Ready.
What is your daily breakfast?
No breakfast.
Oh, okay. What is your current show? What show are you currently watching on Netflix?
So who says I have Netflix? No, I I do. I'm watching a show that's from Finland called Borderland. Borderland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you a morning or night person?
Morning, but recently more night. Yeah. I think I kind of changed.
Are you and is it, oh wait, before I jump into that, is it because of the current level 3 restrictions in Taiwan?
It is a little. So sometimes if I have an idea or like something I want to create, I end up getting really into it at night, and then I'm just like on my computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you an Android or iOS user?
Android.
Are you a Mac or PC user?
Is that your cat?
It's my cat. They're actually trying to get my attention. Mac.
Okay, so I'll answer the question. Mac. I've used Mac all my life. Yeah.
Do you play games? What's your favorite game, if ever?
No, I don't really play games, but like if I'm with my family or something, we really like to play like card games. Yeah, card games.
A board game, right? So what's your favorite board game or card game?
Twister.
Okay. Are you what's your favorite movie of all time?
recently, I think currently it's called Riding with the Wolves. It's set in China, I think in Sichuan. Yeah, Riding with the Wolves. It's more of a documentary. It's really amazing.
What's your favorite book or books, if you have?
I think it changes, but I would say currently the book that I love the most is called Hong Lo Mong, or The Dream of the Red Chamber. Yeah, it's a classic Chinese literature. It's amazing. Yeah.
All right. Finally, let's talk about your action items. How can we help you here on the show, and what are your plans?
I think what you could do is, if you know of anybody who would benefit from understanding more their own cultural background, as well as maybe the host or having a better cultural framework to be more successful in their work or their lives, then please point them my way. I'd love to talk to them further.
Sure. I think with what you do, maybe we could look into applying for government grants related to promotion of culture. There is a specific government grant that allows people to actually create projects that will introduce people's culture, not just the Taiwanese culture, but also foreign culture to Taiwan, so that Taiwan could learn from it. And I guess that's something that we could do and research on, and then we can email you some details about it.
All right, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for joining our show, Michelle. We enjoyed talking with you. And for our audience, that's it for now. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.